The moment I saw her, everything in me screamed that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the way she kept laughing too loud at my jokes or the way she lingered just a little too close to my partner, it was the energy she was putting into making herself seen. And I could feel it. My partner, Kate, had always been close with her, this friend of hers. Emma, as she introduced herself to me when we first met, was an old friend from university. Kate had always made excuses for Emma's odd behaviors, explaining that she was harmless, just the kind of person who thrived on attention. But as the years went on, something about Emma's presence felt less like harmless fun and more like an overstep, like she was pushing the boundaries of what was appropriate for someone who wasn't family. That summer day, though, as the smell of grilling burgers and the sound of laughter filled the backyard, something shifted. It started as something small, just a few innocent exchanges between Emma and Kate, but I could see it slowly turning into something else. The way Emma touched Kate's arm, the lingering glances that passed between them, it wasn't just flirtation, but something deeper, something that felt calculated. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself that I was being paranoid. After all, we were surrounded by family, friends, and familiar faces. It wasn't like Emma had any reason to act like that, right? But as the day went on, I realized I wasn't the only one noticing. My brother, Matt, who had always been sharp when it came to people's motives, leaned in during a quiet moment. "You good man?" he asked, his gaze shifting subtly toward Emma. "Something seems off about her. Am I the only one who feels that?" I hadn't said a word to anyone about my growing unease, but Matt had picked up on it too. He was always good at reading people, and this time, I was grateful for it. He wasn't the kind of guy who usually paid attention to details like this, so the fact that he noticed meant I wasn't imagining things. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice low as I glanced at Emma, who was now laughing a little too loudly, her fingers grazing Kate's shoulder. "Something's off. I'm not sure what yet, but it's like she's trying to push her way into our personal space. I don't know if Kate sees it." Matt gave me a concerned look, but before we could discuss it further, Emma suddenly appeared next to us, her smile a little too wide, her eyes too bright. "Hey, you guys. What's up?" she asked, practically jumping into the conversation, her tone too chipper, too overcompensating for my liking. I could tell that she knew we were talking about her, and instead of backing off, she leaned in even closer. "Everything's great, Emma," I replied curtly, forcing a smile. "Just enjoying the food." She didn't take the hint, of course. Emma had never been good at reading the room. Or maybe she just didn't care. As the conversation drifted back to the general chaos of the barbecue, I caught her eye one more time. There was something in the way she looked at me, a glimmer of challenge, as if daring me to say something, to confront whatever was simmering beneath the surface. I glanced over at Kate, who was chatting with some of her friends on the other side of the yard. Her back was turned, and she was oblivious to what was unfolding in front of her. But in that moment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. I needed to take control of the situation before it spiraled any further. The tension between Emma and me had been growing for months, but I had avoided confronting it, not wanting to cause trouble with Kate. But now, in this moment, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. Emma had crossed the line, and if I didn't address it, things were only going to get worse. I stood up abruptly, my hand resting on Matt's shoulder for a moment, signaling for him to stay put. Then, I made my way across the yard, weaving through groups of people. I tried to keep my movements steady, despite the adrenaline rushing through me. This was going to be uncomfortable, but it was necessary. As I approached Kate, she turned to greet me with a bright smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing. "Hey, babe," she said, her eyes sparkling with the warmth I had always admired. "Isn't this great? Everyone's having so much fun." I nodded, smiling back at her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Yeah, it's been a good time," I replied, my voice softer than usual. "But we need to talk." Kate's smile faltered slightly, sensing the change in my tone. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. You seem a little distant. I exhaled, trying to find the right words. It's Emma, I said, lowering my voice so only she could hear. There's something off about her today, Kate. The way she's been acting, the way she's been getting too close to you, touching you. I don't know what it is, but it's making me uncomfortable. The moment the words left my mouth, I could see the shift in Kate's face. Her brows furrowed, and she turned to look at Emma, who was still standing by the grill, her back turned to us. She's just being playful, Mark, Kate said, her tone defensive. You know how she is. She's always been a bit much, but that's just how she is. She's harmless. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. But the look on Emma's face, the way she kept pushing boundaries even now, was impossible to ignore. Kate, I said gently, I'm not saying she's malicious. But this isn't just playful. It's uncomfortable. And I'm not the only one noticing it. Kate hesitated, and I could tell she was processing my words, trying to reconcile the image of Emma as the harmless friend with the reality of what was unfolding. Finally, she sighed. I'll talk to her, she said, her voice softening. But I don't want you to think you're overreacting. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. But I wasn't so sure. I'd seen enough to know that Emma didn't take kindly to being called out, especially when she thought she was in control. As much as Kate wanted to downplay it, I couldn't shake the feeling that the situation wasn't going to resolve itself just with a quick conversation. The evening wore on, the sun dipping lower in the sky as the barbecue continued in full swing. People laughed and chatted, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. Emma had shifted her focus once more, this time, to me. She moved over to where I stood near the grill, pretending to admire the food. I could feel her eyes on me, like she was waiting for something to happen. And just like that, the tension between us snapped. You know, Mark, she said, stepping a little too close, her voice lowering, you're not as bad as I thought. I mean, it must be tough living in Kate's shadow. She's so perfect, isn't she? I blinked, taken aback by her comment. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, my voice sharp. I wasn't in the mood for games, especially not now. Emma smirked, her eyes glinting with mischief. Oh, come on. You really think she doesn't need people around her to keep her happy? She's got this perfect little life with you, but you both know there's a lot of cracks in it. And she needs someone to fill those spaces. That was it. I'd had enough. Without thinking, I turned toward Emma, stepping so close that our faces were mere inches apart. You don't know anything about us, I said through clenched teeth, my voice firm and cold. You're crossing a line, Emma. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you turn this into something more than it is, you've got another thing coming. I won't stand by and watch you use Kate as your personal playground. So, if you value our friendship at all, I suggest you back off. Now. Her smug expression faltered just slightly, and for the first time, I saw her look a little uncertain. You're just jealous, she spat back, though the tremor in her voice gave her away. No, I said, my voice calm and steady. I'm not jealous. But I'm done pretending everything is fine when it's not. If you want to stay in our lives, you need to respect boundaries. No more games, no more flirting. Just, stay in your lane. The silence that followed felt like an eternity, the tension hanging thick in the air. Emma opened her mouth as if to say something, but then, with a flick of her hair, she turned on her heel and walked away without another word. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, but as I looked over at Kate, I could see the shift in her expression. She had been watching us from the corner of the yard, her eyes wide. And for the first time that day, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. Or so I thought. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of tension and uncomfortable glances. Kate and I didn't speak much after my confrontation with Emma, and I couldn't tell if the silence between us was because she was processing what had just happened or if she was mad at me for stepping in the way I did. I wanted to believe she understood why I did it, but the doubt crept in. Had I overreacted? Had I been too harsh? Kate's usually bright smile was gone, replaced by a strained expression, and the warmth between us had all but vanished. She had always been the kind of person who hated confrontation, and seeing me challenge one of her closest friends must have thrown her off guard. I didn't blame her for that. It wasn't easy to watch someone you care about call out a friend like that, especially when she probably didn't fully realize how far Emma had crossed the line. After everyone started to leave, Kate excused herself to go inside the house, leaving me to help clean up. I could tell she was upset, but she hadn't said a word to me about the scene, which made the air even thicker between us. We'd always been able to talk things out before, but now, everything felt so fragile. When I was finally alone, finishing up the cleanup, Matt came over to help, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with a more serious tone. "You good?" he asked, pulling a trash bag out of my hands and tossing it into the bin. I paused for a moment, considering his question. "I think so," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I don't know. I've never been one to jump into confrontations like that. I had to do something, you know?" Matt nodded, his eyes sympathetic. "I get it. I think you did the right thing. But Kate's not going to see it that way. Not yet, at least. She's been friends with Emma for a long time. It's going to take her a little while to digest this." I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of his words. "I just hope I didn't mess things up between us. I don't want her to think I don't trust her or that I'm trying to control her. It's not about that." "I know," Matt said, his voice softer now. "But it's also about you setting boundaries." And Emma was testing them. Kate may not see it right now, but she'll appreciate it in the long run. You've got to trust that she'll come around. As the last guests trickled out, I could see Kate standing by the door, looking out at me with that same unreadable expression. My heart sank as I walked over to her, the silence between us louder than anything else in that moment. "I'm sorry," I said as soon as I reached her, the words coming out before I could stop them. "I didn't mean to make things awkward, but I couldn't let Emma keep pushing like that. I need you to know that I'm not trying to control you. I just want us to be okay." Kate took a deep breath, her eyes still fixed on the ground as she crossed her arms. "I know you're not trying to control me, Mark," she said quietly. "But I don't know if I'm ready to just dismiss Emma like that. She's my friend, and You don't have to choose, Kate," I interrupted gently, my voice steady but filled with concern. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and her. But what I am asking is for you to recognize that the way she was behaving today wasn't okay. She stepped over a line, and I had to say something. If it's going to cause problems, then maybe I'm the one who has to back off, but I don't want you to think I'm just making it about me." Kate finally looked up at me, her eyes a mix of frustration and confusion. "It's just, I don't know what's going on with her lately. I've known Emma for years, and she's always been dramatic, but this feels different. I don't know what to think. I feel like I'm stuck between you and her, and I don't want to lose either of you." I could see the struggle in her face, and I knew this wasn't just about Emma. It was about the relationship we had, and whether or not she could see the bigger picture. I wanted to be the guy who supported her no matter what, but I also needed her to understand that I couldn't sit back and let someone threaten our relationship without speaking up. "I get it, Kate," I said, my voice softer now. "But this isn't just about Emma. It's about us and how we protect what we have. I need you to understand that. I need to know that we're on the same team here. If Emma can't respect that, then maybe she doesn't need to be part of our lives. Not like this." Kate didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her arms still crossed, her gaze distant. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. This is hard. You know how close we are." I took a step forward and placed a hand on her arm, hoping to offer some comfort. I know, Kate. And I'll support you no matter what. But I just need you to see that this isn't about tearing things apart. It's about protecting what we have." Kate looked up at me then, her eyes searching mine. "I'm not going anywhere, Mark. But I need time. I just need time to figure this out." I nodded, relieved that she wasn't pulling away. "Take all the time you need, but just know I'm here." "I'm not going anywhere either." The conversation ended there, and we spent the rest of the evening in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. As the night deepened, I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't entirely settled, but at least we had laid the groundwork for a conversation that needed to happen. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew the road ahead would be rocky, but I had no doubt that it was a road worth walking. Over the next few days, Kate kept her distance, and I gave her the space she needed. She'd always been someone who processed things quietly, and I respected that. I knew she wasn't avoiding me, but she had to sort through her emotions, figure out where she stood between the two of us. But then came the moment I had been dreading, the phone call. It was a Saturday afternoon when Kate finally reached out to me. She had been out running errands, and I had been busy with work. When I saw her name flash across my screen, I answered quickly, not knowing what to expect. "Mark," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "We need to talk." My heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" "I talked to Emma," she said, her words slow, measured. "And I think you were right. She's been crossing boundaries with me, and I didn't see it until you pointed it out. I don't know why I let it go on for so long. But I can't pretend like it was all innocent anymore. She's been taking advantage of my friendship. And I'm done letting it happen." I exhaled, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. This wasn't over yet, but hearing those words from Kate, knowing she saw it now too, was everything. It meant we were on the same page, and together, we could move forward. "I'm proud of you, Kate," I said, my voice full of warmth. "I knew you'd see it. I know it wasn't easy, but I'm glad you understand." She paused for a moment, and I could hear her sigh on the other end. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, Mark. But I can't ignore it anymore. Emma's no longer welcome in our lives, not like this." I smiled, my heart lightening. "I'm here, Kate. Always." After that phone call, I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. It wasn't easy to confront Kate's friend, and it hadn't been easy to question the boundaries in our relationship, but in that moment, it felt like we had taken the first step in re-establishing trust. There was still work to be done, but hearing Kate's words, the clarity in her voice, made me believe that things were going to be okay. The next few days were a bit awkward, but in a way that felt like necessary growing pains. Kate seemed quieter than usual, which I understood. She had just come to terms with something she hadn't fully seen before, and I knew it would take time for her to process it. Still, I did my best to give her the space she needed while also reassuring her that I was there for her. The balance was delicate, but we were walking it together. That Sunday, Kate and I sat down to have a serious conversation, one that I had hoped would be the final chapter in this Emma saga. She had just finished a long phone call with Emma, one where I could tell by the silence that things weren't exactly cordial. Kate had been distant during the call, and I knew what it meant. Emma was no longer welcome, at least not in the way she had been before. "So, how'd it go?" I asked, sitting down beside her on the couch, trying to sound casual even though I was dying to know how she was feeling. We'd talked about it briefly earlier in the week, but I could sense that she was still working through her feelings. Kate took a deep breath, running a hand through her hair. "It was hard, Mark," she admitted. "You know how long I've known Emma, how close we've been. I don't just let people go easily. But after everything that's happened, I realized that she wasn't the friend I thought she was. She wasn't respecting me, and by letting her continue, I wasn't respecting us. I had to make a choice. I just didn't realize how much it would hurt." I squeezed her hand, understanding the pain she was going through. Letting go of people, no matter how toxic they might be, was always harder than it seemed. But in this case, it was necessary. Kate had finally recognized that Emma's behavior had become a serious threat to the relationship we were building, and now, we could move forward without the constant undercurrent of suspicion. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice sincere. "That couldn't have been easy. I know you didn't want to lose a friend, but I hope you know this was the right call." Kate smiled faintly, her eyes a little glassy, but there was a flicker of gratitude there too. "I hope so. But I feel like there's still some unfinished business. You know? Like we didn't just put a pin in it. Emma's going to fight this. She won't just walk away quietly." I nodded. I'd been expecting this. People like Emma weren't known for taking rejection well, especially when they felt like they were losing control over a situation. Kate had always been the center of Emma's orbit, the one who kept her grounded, and now that she was pulling away, Emma might retaliate in ways we couldn't predict. "I'm not worried about that," I said confidently. "We've got each other's backs. If she tries anything, we deal with it together." Kate didn't say anything in response, but I could see the slight change in her demeanor. She didn't have to say the words, I knew she was reassured by my support. And that's all we needed right now, to be on the same team. But just when I thought the storm had passed, things started to get complicated. The next weekend, Kate and I decided to spend a quiet Saturday together, away from the drama, to focus on each other. We had planned a movie night, take-out dinner, and a chance to unwind. But fate had other plans. It was about 6 p.m., and we were settling in with popcorn and our favorite movie when the doorbell rang. Neither of us were expecting anyone, so we both exchanged a puzzled glance. Kate stood up, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. "I'll get it," I said, trying to make light of the situation, even though a pit had already started to form in my stomach. "Probably a delivery or something." But when I opened the door, my stomach sank. Standing there was Emma, looking far too polished for a casual visit, wearing her trademark smug smile. She was holding a bottle of wine, an offering that didn't make her presence any more welcome. "Hey, Mark," Emma said sweetly, her voice laced with a fake warmth that immediately put me on edge. I was hoping we could talk. My instincts kicked in immediately. I didn't want to deal with her, not now, and certainly not like this. "Emma, this isn't a good time," I said firmly, standing in the doorway, trying to keep my voice calm but assertive. "I think we've said everything we need to say." She pressed her lips together, but the smirk didn't leave her face. "Come on, I'm not here to cause trouble," she insisted, trying to make herself sound innocent, as if her presence wasn't already causing enough. "I just wanted to make sure there's no bad blood between us. I think we got off on the wrong foot, and I don't want things to be awkward." I wasn't buying it. "It's too late for that," I said coldly. "We made it clear how things stand. You need to go." Emma's expression shifted just slightly, her eyes narrowing in that familiar, calculating way. "You know, Mark, I'm not going anywhere. I've been friends with Kate for years, and I'm not going to let you scare me off. We're all adults here, so why don't we just sit down and talk about things like civilized people?" I felt my blood begin to boil. I wasn't going to let her undermine me in my own home, especially not after everything that had happened. "No," I said firmly, stepping back to shut the door. "You're not welcome here, Emma. We're done. Please leave." Emma hesitated, as though she were calculating her next move, and for a moment, I thought she might actually leave. But then, just as quickly, she planted her feet firmly on the ground, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She wasn't going to give up that easily. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice low but filled with defiance. "Not until I talk to Kate." I turned around, a sense of dread filling my gut. I could feel it in the air. Emma wasn't here for closure. She was here to stir things up again. And if I didn't stop it now, we could be looking at even more complications. Before I could stop her, Emma stepped past me, moving into the living room without asking. "I know Kate's here," she said, her voice almost sing-song, as though she were walking into a friend's house instead of intruding on a private evening. I'm just going to make sure she knows the truth about everything. Kate had been sitting on the couch, frozen at the sudden intrusion. When she saw Emma walk in, her face froze, the tension between the two women immediately palpable. "Emma," Kate said, standing up, her voice steady, but the flicker of surprise in her eyes showed how rattled she was. "What are you doing here?" Emma turned to Kate, that same fake warmth plastered across her face. "I just wanted to clear the air," she said, her voice too sweet to be genuine. "Mark's been trying to push me out, and I wanted to make sure you knew I wasn't the one causing problems." Kate looked at me, then back at Emma, her expression a mixture of confusion and frustration. "Emma," she said, her voice now taking on an edge. "I'm done. I told you, we're done." The room went silent. For a moment, neither Emma nor I said a word. Then, Emma's eyes flickered with something colder, something darker. "We'll see about that." The atmosphere in the room had shifted, tense, thick with unspoken words and unresolved tension. I could feel it in every breath I took. It was as though the air itself was vibrating with the weight of the moment. Emma had crossed a line, and now, she wasn't just trying to get her way anymore. She was pushing to see how far she could go before we would break. Kate stood there, her posture rigid, her eyes never leaving Emma as if daring her to make the next move. I could see the internal struggle on Kate's face. Part of her was probably tempted to just tell Emma to leave and be done with it, but I could tell that a larger part of her was holding on to the years of friendship they'd shared. And in some twisted way, I understood that. It wasn't easy letting go of a person you'd known for so long, someone who had been there through thick and thin. But this wasn't the same Emma that Kate had once called a friend. This Emma was manipulative, self-serving, and had proven time and time again that she couldn't respect boundaries, whether it was in her behavior toward me or how she tried to stir conflict between Kate and me. There was no friendship left, not like the one Kate had once cherished. I stepped closer to Kate, placing my hand on her shoulder, my voice calm but firm. "Kate, you don't have to do this," I said, my gaze never leaving Emma. "You've already made your choice. You don't owe her anything." Kate's eyes flickered between me and Emma. The tension was palpable, and I could almost hear the conflict inside her. She wanted to do the right thing, but I knew that part of her didn't want to fully sever ties with Emma, at least not without some kind of closure. But I had been clear with my boundaries, and now it was time for Kate to enforce hers. Emma, however, wasn't done. She stood there, her smile returning to her face, though it now looked more like a mask, one she was using to cover her true intentions. "Kate, come on, don't listen to him," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "He's just trying to manipulate you. We've been friends for so long. You can't just throw that away. You owe me more than this." Kate's expression hardened, her brows furrowing. The crack in her resolve was starting to show, but she wasn't backing down. "I'm not throwing anything away, Emma. But I've already made my decision, and I don't need you to tell me what I owe you." I could see Emma's jaw tighten, and for the first time, I saw her mask slip, just a little. Her eyes darkened, and she took a step closer to Kate. "Don't think you can just walk away from this, Kate. I'm not going to let you throw me out of your life without a fight." Her words hit me like a slap in the face, and I felt my blood start to boil. She still thought she had some kind of control in this situation. She still believed that after everything, she could just walk in, act all sweet, and everything would go back to normal. But that wasn't going to happen. Not today. Not anymore. I didn't let her get any closer to Kate. I stepped forward, planting myself firmly between the two women, my eyes locked on Emma's. "I've had enough of this," I said, my voice low but powerful. "You don't get to come into our home, disrupt everything, and then act like nothing's wrong. I told you before, Emma, you're not welcome here. Leave. Now." Emma didn't flinch at my words, but I could see the frustration bubbling beneath her calm exterior. She stood there, silent for a few seconds, sizing me up as if deciding if I was really serious or if she could still manipulate her way out of this. But there was no backing down now. Kate's voice was barely a whisper when she spoke, but it carried an undeniable weight. Emma, I don't want to do this. But I've already made up my mind. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when you keep crossing boundaries. For the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in Emma's eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The reality was starting to set in. She was losing control. Kate, Emma finally said, her voice strained, you can't really believe this. We've been through too much together for you to just cut me off like this. Kate shook her head, her voice firm. You don't get to guilt trip me anymore, Emma. The way you've been treating me, and Mark, hasn't been okay. I'm done letting you play these games. There was a long pause. Emma's face twisted with something between frustration and anger, but there was no denying that she knew the game was over. She wasn't going to win this battle. She wasn't going to manipulate Kate into siding with her anymore. And the worst part, she knew it. Fine, Emma said through gritted teeth, her voice now laced with bitterness. You'll regret this, Kate. You'll see. I'm not the one who's going to look foolish in the end. You will. With that, Emma turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she left the house without another word. I didn't take my eyes off her until the door slammed behind her, the silence that followed feeling like the loudest sound in the world. As soon as the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. The tension in the room seemed to deflate, but it wasn't over yet. Kate stood there, her back to me, looking at the door Emma had just exited through. The moment was heavy, filled with the weight of what had just transpired. There was no going back from this. Are you okay? I asked quietly, taking a step toward Kate. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stood there, her shoulders tense, her hands clenched by her sides. It wasn't until I was standing next to her, my hand resting on her shoulder, that she finally turned to face me. I don't know, she admitted softly. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just walk away from Emma, but it was harder than I expected. She's been such a huge part of my life for so long. But I know you're right. She wasn't good for us. She wasn't good for me. I pulled her into a gentle embrace, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, Kate. You did the right thing. Kate nodded against my chest, her voice barely above a whisper. I just didn't realize how much I was holding on to until now. But I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I'm done letting her control things. We stood there for a moment longer, the weight of the situation settling in. I knew it wasn't over, not yet. Emma wasn't the type to give up quietly. She'd be back, and she'd try to make this all her fault. But for now, at least, Kate had made her decision. And we were on the same page. It was late into the evening, and the weight of the day was slowly starting to wear off. Kate and I had spent the rest of the night in a quiet, almost surreal calm, a strange peace settling over us after the chaos of the afternoon. I could sense that Kate was still processing everything, still working through the emotions of what had just happened with Emma. But she wasn't letting it overwhelm her, not in the way I thought she might. We were curled up on the couch, watching some mindless TV show to take our minds off the drama. Every so often, Kate would glance at her phone, and I could tell she was tempted to check messages from Emma. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she would put it back down with a sigh. I knew she wanted to know what Emma was saying, wanted to hear her side of the story. But deep down, I think Kate knew that there wasn't any more truth to be uncovered. There was only manipulation left. Still, I could feel the tension in her. It wasn't just about Emma anymore, it was about Kate reconciling the loss of a friendship that had once been so important to her. And that was something I could only stand by and support her through. I knew she was strong, but that didn't mean this was easy. Just as I was about to say something comforting, the phone rang. Kate's eyes flickered to the screen, and I could see the hesitation in her expression. She didn't need to tell me who it was. Emma had made her intentions very clear. I could tell by the way Kate bit her lip, torn between wanting to answer and knowing that nothing good could come of it. "Don't," I said softly, though I didn't need to say more. "You don't owe her anything, Kate." Kate nodded but didn't respond right away. She stared at the phone in her hand for a few moments, as if weighing the decision. Finally, with a small sigh, she pressed the decline button, letting the call go to voicemail. "Thank you," I whispered, running my hand gently through her hair. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder as if she was trying to push the rest of the world out. "I'm done, Mark," Kate said quietly, her voice almost shaky. "I thought I could fix things, that I could make it right with Emma. But every time I try, she just makes it worse. She's not the person I thought she was." I kissed her forehead, feeling a deep sense of pride in her. It wasn't easy to let go of someone who had been a constant in your life, even if they were toxic. But Kate had made a choice, and now it was time to see it through. The phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Emma. It was a text. Kate glanced at the screen and let out a long breath. "Should I read it?" she asked, almost hesitantly. I nodded. "If you want to. But don't feel like you have to respond. You're in control now." Kate opened the text, her eyes scanning the message before she let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You think you've won? You'll regret this. I won't just let you go so easily. This isn't over. I'll make sure of that." I didn't need to look at Kate's face to know what kind of emotions that message stirred in her. I could feel the anger in the room rise, the tension returning with a vengeance. But this time, it wasn't coming from Emma. It was coming from Kate. "I can't believe her," Kate muttered, shaking her head. "She really thinks she has control over me, over us. After everything." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my own rising anger. "Don't let her win by letting her get to you. She's just trying to get a reaction. Don't give her that power." Kate squeezed my hand and looked at me, a new resolve in her eyes. "I won't. She's done. She can't keep pulling me around anymore." And just like that, I knew she had made peace with it. She was done with Emma. The next step was to make sure Emma knew that the door had been closed, locked and bolted shut. There was no more room for manipulation or guilt trips. No more opportunities for Emma to worm her way back in. But I also knew that Emma wasn't the type to back down easily. She would try something else. I didn't know what form that would take yet, but I had no doubt that she would show up again, trying to reopen the door that Kate had just slammed shut. And when she did, we needed to be prepared. We didn't have to wait long for that to happen. The very next day, Kate received another text from Emma, this one more direct than the last. "If you think this is over, think again. I'll be at the family gathering on Saturday. I expect to see you there." The words were clear, and they carried a challenge. Emma wasn't just going to let Kate go easily, she wanted to provoke her, get a reaction. And this time, Emma wasn't going to be subtle. I could see the tension building in Kate again, the temptation to just ignore the message and hope it would all go away. But I knew that ignoring Emma wasn't an option anymore. Emma had crossed the line, and now it was time for Kate to stand her ground. "We can't just let her show up like this, Mark," Kate said, her voice shaky but determined. "She's already tried to make everything difficult. She can't just show up at a family gathering like nothing happened." I knew this was coming. I could see how much it was affecting Kate, but she was right. Emma wasn't going to just walk into their social circle like she still had a claim on Kate. This was bigger than just a friendship, it was about boundaries, respect, and making sure no one was allowed to dictate the terms of our lives. "Let's take control of this, Kate," I said firmly, my hand squeezing hers. "You don't need to hide. You don't need to cower. If she shows up, we'll make sure she knows exactly where she stands. No more games. Kate looked at me, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of fear and resolve. She wasn't entirely sure what that would look like yet, but she knew what was at stake. She had already decided that she wasn't going to let Emma push her around anymore. This was the moment where we drew the line in the sand. I won't let her walk all over me again, Kate said, her voice low and steady. And I won't let her come between us. Not now. Not ever. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride in Kate. She wasn't backing down. We weren't backing down. The storm had come, but we were ready for it. And when the dust settled, it would be Emma who was left standing outside the door, looking in. The game was on, and this time, it was Kate who had the upper hand. Saturday arrived, and the tension in the air was almost unbearable. The whole week had been a build-up, a delicate dance of anticipation and dread. Kate and I had spent the last few days preparing, mentally and emotionally, for the confrontation that was looming. We knew Emma wasn't going to let go easily, and after her text the day before, it was clear that she had every intention of showing up at the family gathering, determined to make her presence felt. The gathering itself was supposed to be a light-hearted event, a barbecue with Kate's family, some close friends, and the usual mix of laughter, good food, and easy conversation. But now, it felt like the calm before a storm. I could already sense that Kate was on edge, though she was doing her best to stay composed. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the table, and I could tell she was already thinking about what might unfold when Emma arrived. I wasn't sure exactly what Emma's plan was. After all, she had no idea what Kate and I were planning. She didn't know that we were prepared to put our foot down once and for all, to shut her down before she could even get a foot in the door. We were both nervous. I could feel the anxiety radiating off Kate, but I also saw a new fire in her eyes, an inner strength that hadn't been there a week ago. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about Kate taking back control of her life. And as much as I hated the situation Emma had put us in, I had to admit that I was proud of Kate for how far she'd come. The moment arrived. Kate's family had just begun to settle in, and the grill was sizzling with food, the sound of chatter filling the backyard. But in the pit of my stomach, I felt that familiar sense of dread. I kept scanning the street, half expecting Emma to show up early. Sure enough, at 4:30, the unmistakable sound of a car pulling up outside reached my ears. I didn't need to look at Kate to know what was happening. Her eyes darted to the window, and I saw the realization wash over her face. This was it. Emma had arrived, and everything we had planned for the past few days was about to unfold. "Are you sure about this?" Kate asked, her voice barely audible. She had been holding it together so far, but now, I could see the doubt creeping in. She had been bracing herself for this moment, but the reality of it was still sinking in. I walked over to her, my hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Yes, I'm sure. You've got this. We've got this." Kate nodded, taking a deep breath as if preparing for battle. "Okay. Let's do this." I could hear Emma's voice as she greeted Kate's family, laughing loudly in making her way toward the gathering like she was still part of the group. But there was no going back now. Emma wasn't going to waltz in and make herself at home. Not today. Not anymore. Kate took my hand as we walked toward the door. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. This was our moment to take control. When we stepped outside, Emma's eyes locked onto Kate almost immediately, her smile wide but false. I could see the gleam in her eye, that look that said she was ready to start her game again, to test the waters and see if she could manipulate the situation to her advantage. "Kate," Emma said, her voice dripping with sugary sweetness. "So glad you could make it. I was hoping we could chat, catch up like old times." But Kate didn't flinch. She didn't falter. She stood tall and met Emma's gaze head-on, her posture firm, her jaw set. "I'm glad you could make it too, Emma," Kate said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable edge. But let's make one thing clear. We're not picking up where we left off. The atmosphere shifted in an instant. Emma blinked, the smile on her face faltering for the briefest moment. She wasn't expecting this. She thought she could waltz in, and that would be it. Kate would fold like she always had before. But this time was different. "I'm not sure I understand," Emma said, her voice barely concealing her irritation. She looked at me, almost as if expecting me to back down, but I stood next to Kate, unwavering. "I thought we were past all the drama. I thought we could be civil." "Civility is earned, Emma," Kate responded, her voice steady. "And you've lost any right to expect that from me. You've crossed too many lines, and I'm not playing your games anymore." I could see the color drain from Emma's face as she processed Kate's words. The confrontation was happening. There was no turning back now. But Emma began, but Kate interrupted her, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "No, Emma. You don't get to talk." "Not anymore," Kate said, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing. "I've let you walk all over me for far too long, and I've let you manipulate me into thinking that you actually cared. But you didn't. You've only cared about yourself and your own agenda." Emma's face twisted into something darker, something closer to the version of herself Kate had been too blind to see before. "You think I'm the problem here," she spat. "You really think it was all me? You think he's the good guy in all of this?" "I think you're the problem, Emma," Kate said, her voice now dripping with finality. "And if you think you can show up here, stir things up, and walk away unscathed, you're sorely mistaken." There was a long silence. I could feel the weight of the words hanging between them, each one a nail in the coffin of Emma's attempted manipulation. The other guests were watching, sensing the tension in the air, but I didn't care. This was about Kate. This was her moment. And I was right there beside her. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice venomous. "You'll regret this, Kate. You're going to regret pushing me away. I'll make sure of it." Kate's response was unwavering. "No, Emma. I'm done. You're done. You've had your chance." With that, Emma stood still for a long moment, her eyes narrowing in cold fury. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed off, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement as she left the gathering. The tension seemed to melt away the moment she stepped off the property. It was over. Kate and I stood there for a few seconds, processing what had just happened. Then, she turned to me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, relief. "We did it," Kate said softly, a hint of wonder in her voice. "It's finally over." I smiled at her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You were amazing, Kate. You stood your ground. I'm proud of you." As we stood there, the rest of the family began to murmur amongst themselves, but the underlying tension had lifted. The storm had passed, and in its wake, there was nothing but clarity. Emma had tried to break us. She had tried to tear us apart, to manipulate, to control. But we had won. Kate had stood up for herself, and we had drawn the line in the sand. And now, finally, we could breathe easy.